Imagine standing in the middle of a wasteland. For hundreds of miles in every direction, there is nothing but shifting sand, blistering heat, and the unforgiving silence of the Syrian desert. Survival here isn't difficult, it's statistically impossible. But 2,000 years ago, if you marched into this exact wilderness, the dust would part to reveal something miraculous. A sprawling metropolis of gleaming limestone. Theater curtains rising. Fountains bubbling with fresh water. Markets overflowing with Chinese silk, Indian spices, and Roman gold. This was Palmyra, the bride of the desert. For centuries, it was the ultimate anomaly, a city that shouldn't have existed, thriving in a place where nothing else could. It grew so rich, so fiercely independent, that it did the unthinkable. It turned its back on the Roman Empire and forged an empire of its own, led by a legendary warrior queen. But wealth born of the desert is fragile. Today, we journey into the heart of the ancient world's greatest oasis to uncover how it rose to absolute glory and the tragic, violent erasure that left it in ruins. Welcome back to Untold Wonders. To understand Palmyra, we have to look at the map of the ancient world. In the 1st century BCE, global trade was booming, but it faced a massive logistical nightmare. If you wanted to move goods from the Silk Roads of the East to the luxury markets of Rome, you had two choices. You could take the long, dangerous northern route through the mountains, or you could risk the brutal heat of the southern desert. The desert route was faster, but it had a fatal catch. Humans need water. Palmyra's story begins with a geological miracle. Beneath the cracked earth lay the Efqa spring, a natural sulfur thermal spring that had been bubbling up water for millennia. For nomadic tribes, this was a sacred sanctuary. In the earliest records, dating back to the tablets of Babylon, the site was called Tadmor, meaning the place of palms. For centuries, Tadmor was just a quiet pit stop. But as Rome's appetite for Eastern luxuries grew insatiable, the Palmyrenes realized they were sitting on a geopolitical gold mine. They weren't just desert nomads anymore. They became the ultimate middlemen. They built massive, armed caravans. They didn't just navigate the desert, they mastered it. They negotiated treaties with fierce Bedouin tribes, cleared out bandits, and established secured trade routes stretching from the Mediterranean coast all the way to the Euphrates River. If you were a merchant carrying priceless cargo, you paid the Palmyrenes for protection. And boy, did they collect. By the 2nd century CE, Palmyra was swimming in cash. The tax tariffs of Palmyra, which still survive on a massive stone tablet today, reveal that they taxed everything. Purple dye, olive oil, camels, prostitutes, and slaves. Every single item entering or leaving the oasis filled the city's coffers. And they spent that wealth in the grandest way possible. Walking down the Great Colonnade was designed to blow your mind. Stretching for over a kilometer, this wasn't just a street. It was a grand architectural stage. The columns featured unique stone brackets holding bronze statues of the city's wealthiest merchants and civic heroes. Look closely at the architecture, and you see the true soul of Palmyra. It was a cultural chameleon. They didn't just copy Rome, and they didn't just copy Persia. They fused them. Their temples featured Roman Corinthian columns, but inside, the gods they worshipped were Mesopotamian and Arabian, like Bel, Yerbal, and Aglabal. The people wore Roman togas in public elite spaces, but their funerary art tells a completely different story. Palmyra developed a deeply unique tradition of honoring their dead. They built massive towers of silence, multi-story stone towers acting as family mausoleums, housing hundreds of bodies. Each burial niche was sealed with a limestone plaque carved with a high-relief portrait of the deceased. These faces are hauntingly beautiful. Unlike the idealized, smooth statues of Rome, Palmyrene art is deeply personal. Women are depicted draped in heavy Persian robes, their fingers covered in rings, wearing elaborate tiaras that signaled their family's immense wealth. The men are often shown with wide, staring eyes, looking out into eternity. They wanted to be remembered not as subjects of an empire, but as proud, wealthy citizens of a sovereign desert kingdom. But as the 3rd century approached, the world outside the oasis began to fracture. The empires flanking Palmyra were about to collapse into chaos, and the bride of the desert would be forced to step out of the shadows. We are at the halfway mark of our journey, and the story of Palmyra is about to take a dark, thrilling turn. We're leaving behind the era of peaceful trade and entering an age of iron, betrayal, and a war for the soul of the ancient world. If you are loving this deep dive into history's lost empires, take just 1 second right now to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Here at Untold Wonders, our mission is to rescue these incredible stories from the dust of time. And when you subscribe, you ensure that history's greatest mysteries are never forgotten. Join our community of history explorers. It's completely free, and it helps us produce these high-production documentaries for you every single week. Hit subscribe, and let's dive into the rise of Palmyra's ultimate warrior queen. In the mid-3rd century, the Roman Empire suffered a near-fatal heart attack. History calls it the crisis of the 3rd century. In a span of just 50 years, over 25 different men claimed the Roman imperial throne. Most were assassinated. To make matters worse, a ferocious new superpower rose in the east, the Sassanid Persian Empire. The Persians smashed through Roman lines, captured the Roman Emperor Valerian alive, and used him as a literal footstool for their king. Rome's eastern provinces were completely undefended. The entire region was ripe for the picking. Enter Odenathus, the ruler of Palmyra. Realizing Rome was powerless, he raised a massive army of Palmyra's desert cavalry and Bedouin allies. He didn't just defend the Oasis. He swept across the region, thoroughly thrashing the Persian army and single-handedly stabilizing the Roman East. Rome was so grateful they effectively made him the ruler of the entire Eastern Empire. Palmyra was now at the absolute zenith of its geopolitical power. But in the year 267, Odenathus was mysteriously assassinated. With the king dead, the throne passed to his infant son, but the real power fell to the boy's mother, a woman whose name would echo through history as the ultimate symbol of rebellion, Queen Zenobia. Zenobia was not content with merely managing an oasis. She was highly educated, speaking Egyptian, Greek, Latin, and Aramaic. She claimed descent from Cleopatra, and she possessed an ambition that terrified Rome. Seeing that the new Roman emperor, Aurelian, was tied down fighting barbarians in the west, Zenobia struck. In 270 CE, she launched a military blitzkrieg. Her brilliant general, Zabdas, led the armored Palmyrene heavy cavalry, the Clibanarii, across the region. They conquered Egypt, cutting off Rome's vital grain supply. They marched north, taking control of trade routes through modern-day Turkey. Zenobia declared total independence from Rome. She minted coins with her own face and her son's face, bearing the titles of Augusta and Augustus. For a brief, shining moment, the Palmyrene Empire ruled the ancient East. A desert tribe had officially broken the back of the Roman eagle. But Zenobia underestimated one man, Emperor Aurelian. Known as Restitutor Orbis, the restorer of the world, Aurelian was a brutal, no-nonsense military genius. Having stabilized the West, he turned his iron gaze toward the east. He marched his battle-hardened legions across Europe, determined to crush the rebel queen. The two armies clashed in modern-day Turkey and Syria. The Palmyrene heavy cavalry was devastating, but Aurelian outsmarted them. He ordered his light infantry to feign retreat, drawing out the heavily armored Palmyrenes until their horses collapsed from sheer exhaustion in the heat. Then, the Romans turned and slaughtered them. Driven back to the walls of Palmyra, Zenobia prepared for a long siege, relying on the desert to starve out the Romans. But Aurelian's supply lines held. Realizing the end was near, Zenobia slipped out of the city on a camel, fleeing toward Persia to secure reinforcements. But she was captured at the banks of the Euphrates River. Aurelian initially spared the city, leaving a small garrison behind. But the fiercely independent Palmyrenes revolted the moment the emperor left. This time, Aurelian showed no mercy. He spun his legions around, marched back to Palmyra, and tore the city down to its foundations. The grand palaces were pillaged. The temples were defaced. The great colonnade was broken. The trade routes shifted. The Efqa spring dried down to a trickle, and the survivors scattered into the winds. The glittering oasis was swallowed once again by the sands of the Syrian Desert, transforming from a living empire into a silent cemetery of stone. Palmyra reminds us that human ingenuity can conquer even the most hostile environments on Earth. For a few glorious centuries, a group of desert dreamers looked at a wasteland and saw a global metropolis. They challenged the greatest empire on earth, and though they fell, their stones refused to be forgotten. Even in ruin, Palmyra stands as a testament to the defiant spirit of humanity. Thank you for traveling across time with us today. If this journey into the sands of Palmyra sparked your sense of wonder, please show your support by hitting the like button. Leave a comment below. Do you think Zenobia was a heroic freedom fighter, or did her ambition doom her city? I read every single comment. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to Untold Wonders. By subscribing, you support independent historical research and storytelling, helping us bring more forgotten empires back to life. Click the video on your screen right now to explore our next ancient mystery. And until next time, keep exploring.